Nope, I'm not ranking every Scream movie, I'm ranking every Scream. Like I paid someone to compile every time anyone screams in the franchise and I'm gonna rank all of them. This is one of the dumbest things I've ever done. In order to help me sort out all 162 Screams, I use the following criteria to help judge them. The main one is the sound of the scream. How blood-curdling is it? Does hearing it give you goosebumps? Is it loud enough to make the neighbors call the cops? Criteria number 2, the context of the scream. Is it just someone getting scared by a prank, or is it the real thing? Does it move the plot forward? Does it enhance the horror? Criteria number 3, how well performed is this scream by the actor? This is what's really gonna set the Scream Queens apart from the rookies of raucousness. And criteria number 4, how well is the scream presented in the movie? It could be the best scream in the world, but if it's not prominently featured in the movie, it's not gonna do anything for me. At the end, we're gonna compile the data and answer some of the most pressing questions. Which character screams the most? What is the screamiest Scream movie? And which film had the highest rated screams? How frequently do screams occur in the franchise? And which movie has the highest concentration of screams? And what is the purpose of screams, not just in horror, but in humanity as a whole? I'm ready to jump into the mayhem, but before I can, I do have to lay down the rules so that we're all on the same page. This'll be quick.
There are certain rules.
Rule number 1, repeat screams over a short period of time will be treated as one scream. That way, if we have one character who screams over and over, it doesn't create a million entries on this list. Rule number 2, I'm only going to include standalone screams performed for the sole purpose of screaming. If someone is screaming their dialogue like this, it doesn't count. Rule number 3, I'm not counting screams from other movies like this one.
Oh, God,
which there are a surprising amount of. Technically, that means I shouldn't rank the screams in Stab 6 or Stab 7 either, which we see extended segments of at the beginning of Scream. Only one of these screams is particularly good though, which is this one. But trust me, it's better if we don't include these. They would seriously bog down the list. Rule number 4, if it's more of a grunt and doesn't quite cross into Scream territory, I didn't include it. Same goes for cheers, they don't count. Look, we're gonna have plenty of screams to talk about here. We don't need to include anything borderline, otherwise this video is gonna be way too long. Look, it's already way too long. And a few disclaimers before we start, there will be spoilers. The Scream movie that came out in 2011 is called Scream, but I will refer to it as Scream 4 in this video just for better vocal clarity because I'm gonna be saying it a lot. Same thing with the movie that came out in 2022. The title is just Scream, but I'll be calling it Scream 5. I've ranked each Scream out of 10, so I'll start with the 1 out of 10 Screams and work my way up to the 10 out of 10 masterpieces. Here we go. Scream 3, Jennifer Jolie makes an annoying sound while trying to read a fax in the dark. After Ghostface takes over the quote-unquote rap party that the actors hold after the cancellation of Stab 3, he starts sending cryptic messages through Jennifer's fax machine. And I think the title of this entry says everything I wanted to say about why this one ranks as low as it does. Enough said. This one sucks and we've got a lot of screams to get through. Scream 3, Sydney opens a fake door in the movie set version of her house. If you listen closely, there is a scream right here. I debated calling this a gasp, but I think it does enough to cross into Scream territory. Why not? I'll include it. Scream 2, Sydney screams when Ghostface crashes the police guy's car. This one happens in a scene where Sydney's police protection detail tries to take her and Hallie out of town, but they're ambushed by a Ghostface killer who hijacks the vehicle. Honestly, between the chaotic editing, all the sounds of vehicular impact, and the loudness of the soundtrack, I barely even noticed that there was a scream from Sydney right here. It's part of a common trend we'll see in this video of Sydney's screams being drowned out by other noises, most commonly Marco Beltrami's soundtrack. Scream 2, the rogue scream that happens while Casey is sneaking around the side of the house in Stab. Someone just screamed for no reason. I'm giving this one a bad ranking for screaming at an inappropriate time during the movie. I don't like when people do that. Scream 4, gunshots ring out during Stabathon and the crowd disperses. After Gail is attacked, Dewey fires a couple of shots at the perpetrator, leading to all the Stabathon attendees getting the fuck out. It's just a bunch of crowd sounds, what do you want me to say? Scream 2, Dewey jumps off a brick wall to steal some guy's cell phone. Come on, this is a lame scream. It's more of an indication that the guy is annoyed than anything. Imagine getting tackled out of nowhere and then you realize the person who stole your phone is a famous news reporter. Anyway, not much to say about this one. So, Scream 2, Debbie Salt sees the light grid about to fall on her. This is such a minor scream. Sydney goes on the offensive by cutting down everything set up for the stage production of Agamemnon. And as Debbie is being attacked by theater items, she's mostly just letting out grunts and oh no's. But when Sydney cuts the big lights loose, we get a little scream from her. It's not special and I'm mostly just including it as a technicality. Scream 1, Billy comes back to Sid's window as she calls 911. This one sucks. It hardly qualifies as a scream at all. The little shriek she gave the first time he appeared at her window was more audible than this. This scream is like the little noise your dog makes when he or she wants to go outside. Granted, the music stinger kind of covers up the sound of her scream, but my argument is that if her scream was more of a horror scream, we wouldn't need the excessive sound effect to startle the audience. I actually am a little unsure how it's possible to even scream this quietly. Overall, not the best showing for Sidney Prescott. I do find Billy's line right after this pretty funny though.
Door's locked, I heard screaming.
Because the only scream that has happened up to this point is this little shriek that she lets out when he took a swing at her earlier. You wouldn't hear that from the outside. It could be a plot hole, or it could be evidence that Billy's lying. Something that we may only notice on a rewatch, or if you're making a really dumb video ranking all the screams in the Scream franchise. Scream 4, Deputy Perkins gets stabbed in the head. Both police officers guarding the Roberts house, where Sidney is staying with her aunt and cousin, are murdered. But Deputy Haas doesn't really scream, he just kind of croaks. Perkins gets stabbed in the head and gives probably the worst performance in this entire video. He doesn't even sound like he's in pain, he just sounds annoyed. That's the kind of scream you make when you hit your funny bone, not when you're stabbed in the f***ing skull. Now, I would try to make an excuse for him and say that he wasn't reacting normally because the knife damaged the circuitry in his brain or something, but right after that, he says, "Oh shit," and tries to get out of the car. So I really can't make much of a case for him. It's just a hilariously underplayed on-screen death. I don't think Anthony Anderson is a bad actor. Sure, Kangaroo Jack was silly, but his death scene in The Departed was literally shocking to audiences. So what happened here? Who knows? There's a tone shift in Scream 4 for sure, but maybe this was just one of those moments where Wes Craven should have gotten some alternate takes. Scream 6, Mindy secretly gets a stainless steel surprise in the subway system. As the Core 4 heads back to an abandoned movie theater to try to set up a final showdown with the killers, Mindy gets separated from the others and Bailey gets to her, despite being on a busy train car. I get what they were going for here, but this whole scenario is just ridiculous. Blackouts or not, there's just no way you could get away with this in a crowded subway car without people noticing. And don't these things have cameras? By covering her mouth when she screams, the idea is that people don't notice her over the sound of the train, which it's not actually that loud when you're inside, and even with your mouth covered, look, you can still make enough noise to draw attention. And the fact that she couldn't,
You're pathetic.
Scream 2, the blocks fall on Debbie Salt. After outing herself as one of the Ghostface killers at Windsor College, Sidney unleashes a flurry of stage set pieces on her evil ex-boyfriend's vengeful mother. And the result is a scream that I can barely hear and is not on screen for very long, so I'm not gonna spend much time or energy talking about it. Next, Scream. Scream 3, Tom Prince blows up. Yep, you heard that right. This one comes during that scene where Ghostface sends cryptic script pages to Jennifer's house over fax. Tom, not realizing the house is filled with gas, pulls out his lighter to help illuminate the page and realizes he's screwed as soon as he sees what it says. He begins to scream, but it's cut off by his death via fiery explosion. The explosion is cool, but this video isn't about explosions, it's about screams, and we only hear about a tenth of his. Scream 6, Sam and Detective Bailey charge at each other. I can't even properly judge the screams here because the whole premise of this moment is just the corniest thing in the whole movie. Like, why do movies have to do this screaming and running at each other thing? I generally don't watch the movies that include this kind of stuff, but I see it in trailers all the time. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a movie like Scream. A movie whose central premise always involves a killer who the protagonists need to get away from, which is exactly what Sam should be doing right here. He literally has a loaded gun and he just decides not to shoot it until after they've collided. This is stupid and I can't take the Scream seriously here. It belongs in a Saturday morning cartoon aimed at ages 5 to 8 or something. Scream 6, Mindy gets slashed in the arm. That was a weird scream. Is it just me or was her template for this scream the Nintendo 64 kid? The Nintendo 64 was released in 1996, just a few months before Scream 1. But our next scream isn't from Scream 1. It's from Scream 3, Jennifer Jolie sees Tyson tussle with Ghostface. I think this one is pretty self-explanatory, just not a whole lot going on there. Moving on. Scream 4, Ghostface sneaks up behind Gail at Stabathon and she notices. The first moment where Charlie tries to stab her doesn't yield a big scream. And that's actually the only time she screams during this encounter. I thought there were more, but it's just the screams coming from the stab movie, which doesn't count. And those are your 1 out of 10 screams, the bottom of the barrel. Now get ready for a bunch of screams that are only slightly better. It's the 2 out of 10s. Scream 6, Chaos during the movie theater showdown. These ones come from the ending showdown of Scream 6. There are a couple small screams from the Carpenter sisters after Ghostface jumps down and starts slashing at them. And they're not really worth expanding more on. Scream 1. Sydney witnesses Billy seemingly getting stabbed by Ghostface. As part of Billy and Stu's plan, they stage Billy's death using corn syrup, and during the slash, Sydney lets out a little yelp. Her visual reaction is pretty convincing and well acted, but like many of her screams in this movie, you can barely hear her voice over the soundtrack. Thanks a lot, Scream composer Marco Beltrami. After this, she gives a little gasp, which I don't really count, and then Stu stabs Billy again and she does a silent scream, which would easily be at the bottom of this list if it wasn't connected to that other yelp she gives. Even that shouldn't rank very highly, but I have to give it a little credit because it might be a perfectly fine scream that just got overpowered by the soundtrack. Scream 3. The women who almost get hit by Cotton's car as he rushes home. We don't really even see these characters, so I'm not gonna rank this that highly. It's a scream, but it's mostly just environmental noise. It reminds me of those sound effects that would happen in Midnight Club whenever you came close to hitting pedestrians. Midnight Club 1 and 2 were awesome because you could just straight up hit people. And in Midnight Club 2, they would yell at you in different languages based on what city you're in. But Midnight Club 3 is lame because they just get against the wall and it's impossible to hit them. The reason is that the third game had real car brands and they didn't want their brands to be associated with criminal activity in the game about underground street racing. Thanks to Scream 3 for restoring some edge to the number 3. Speaking of which, Scream 3, Dewey blows a fuse. Dewey is trying to disarm the electronic locks to get into the screening room where Roman and Sid's battle is taking place, and the resulting scream is pretty cartoony. That sound honestly doesn't belong in any live-action movie. Scream 3, Tyson Fox tackles Ghostface and subsequently gets stabbed. I think the tackle counts as a scream, but the grunt when he gets the knife does not. Qualifying as a scream and qualifying as a good scream are two very different conversations though. Scream 3, Dewey gets startled by Jennifer Jolie and points a gun at her. These Scream 3 actor characters are surprisingly undramatic with their jump scare screams. She sounds more like her sister stole her outfit or something. No, Jennifer, there's a gun pointed at your face. I feel like the appropriate reaction is to either completely freak out or just to put your hands up and be completely silent. Anyway, this is another false scare and not a particularly good one. Scream 3, Jennifer startles Gail while she's trying to sneak into the movie studio archives. This is mostly an unmemorable little yell. One thing this project has made me realize is just how many cheap jump scares the Scream franchise has. It feels like there are just as many examples of characters scaring each other as there are examples of genuine experiences where people get scared by the antagonists. I know that I'm pretty desensitized to horror, being that I have a horror channel and all, but are there genuinely people who are sitting there and getting their heart pumping for every one of these little moments? I tend to think, no, that person doesn't exist, and most of these moments are actually just not scary to anyone. Which begs the question, why include them at all? Seems like maybe the big moments would be even scarier if we weren't already taught not to jump by all of these false scares. Anyway, this one is more forgivable than the others because it leads to some screen time that Gail gets to share with the actress that's portraying her, Jennifer, and that's always entertaining. Scream 3, Roman trips Sydney during the final fight. There are 2 of these, so I'll just count them together. It's funny, usually Ghostface is the one getting tripped, but he really turns the tables here. Are you tired of entries from Scream 3 now that we've just done 6 of them in a row? Too bad. Scream 3, Ghostface sneaks up on Gail in the Hollywood Hills. The group gets separated by the blast after Jennifer's house blows up, giving the killer in a white Norwegian expressionism-inspired mask the perfect opportunity to try to sneak up on Gail. But Dewey is there to protect his future wife. And the sound of the gunshots mostly drowns out her scream, and I'm mostly just including this so that I don't forget about it when it's time to tally up the total stats at the end of this video, which is gonna be fun. It's a good thing this is set in 1999, well before the Neighborhood app ever existed, because you know everyone on the street would have been annoying as f about this. Scream 1. Sydney screams when Kenny gets his throat slashed. Running for her life, Sydney takes cover in the news van outside of the Mocker house. They see Ghostface on the camera inside, but Kenny realizes that there's a 30-second delay, which means the moment he turns around, Ghostface is already there to slice his neck open. Sydney gives us a little shriek. It's not anything special. I might have put it as more of a mid-tier scream, but because she's not on camera for it and we don't see her reaction, I have to put this one down as one of the more forgettable screams that we got from Sidney Prescott. Scream 1, Sydney is stabbed in the shoulder by Ghostface. You know, for a scream titled Sydney is stabbed in the shoulder by Ghostface, you would really think this one would have been more impressive. I mean, the screams aren't actually titled, these are just titles that I'm making up and giving them, but still, you would think the scream that results from Sydney getting stabbed for the first time in a movie called Scream would be this huge ear-shattering moment. But it's not that different from a scream that you would get from watching a scary movie. And you don't really see her face on camera while she's doing it. It's almost like this scream might have been added in post-production. Like they finished the cut and realized their movie was called Scream, but the producers felt there needed to be more screams in it or something, something. Anyway, this one was kinda disappointing. Scream 1, Billy is stabbed with the umbrella. This comes at the end of Scream 1, when Sidney dons the Ghostface costume, hides in a closet, and gives her soon-to-be ex-boyfriend a taste of his own medicine. And the scream he gives is pretty underwhelming. It's not the worst scream in the world, but given the weight of what this scream represents in the story, it doesn't quite match the drama. I mean, Billy is the one who killed Sidney's mother. He helped orchestrate the murder of her best friend, and he nearly took her out before she turned the tables. Now, she literally beat him at his own game. She was the one donning the mask that he used to torture her. His own girlfriend, who he thought he was manipulating, turned out to be the alpha. And for all of that, I feel like we should have gotten a scream that rivals one of Sidney's own iconic screams. But all we get is this little yell. Pathetic. Scream 2. Gail sees Ghostface bang on the glass of the recording studio and screams for some reason. She actually screams a couple times as Ghostface tries to break the glass that separates them. These screams have all the hallmarks of a scream whose potential has been ruined in the edit. They're drowned out by the soundtrack, we don't see Gail's facial expression, and, well, I guess that's it. I don't think anyone's complaining, though. It doesn't feel like we missed out on what would have otherwise been an iconic scream. These are kinda forgettable and honestly kinda unnecessary. When you're in a sound booth, no one can hear you scream. Also, from a psychological perspective, there's no reason for Gail to scream here. It's not doing her any good. There is a more unique scream that utilizes the noise isolation capability of the sound booth, which I'll get to later on in this ranking. Scream 2. Sidney gets startled by the descent of the kidnapped Derek. During the finale of Scream 2, The Sound of Music lures Sidney to the Performing Arts Theater, where she's supposed to star in a production of Agamemnon, and she gets a jump from the appearance of her boyfriend Derek, who is kidnapped and tied to a set piece. She does let out a little scream right here, but it's almost entirely drowned out by the sound of thunder. Which really makes me notice and appreciate the Ghostface killer's dedication to their craft. The effort put forth to make Sidney's experience seem as dramatic as possible, even though they're planning to kill her shortly after. Having the final battle take place on a theater set is one thing, but actually having timed lightning effects, not necessary, but pretty cool. The scream itself, though, we can't really hear much of it. Next scream, please. Scream 5. Sheriff Judy Hicks runs home to a surprise visitor. It's Ghostface. Ghostface is the surprise visitor, to anyone who couldn't figure that out. This is her death scene, and because she didn't have any qualifying screams during her debut in Scream 4, that means this is her one and only sad, pathetic scream. I'm sure the actress Marley Shelton never even thought about this before. There's a lot more to acting than just screaming, obviously, and this is absolutely just a fun and stupid video. But I could just see her watching this and being like, damn, I was only in 2 Scream movies and I only had this one little scream. Hopefully she got to scream in Grindhouse or Valentine 2001, or maybe Death of a Cheerleader. I haven't seen them and I'm not watching them just to find out if Mary Shelton screams. Next scream. Scream 5. Wes Hicks is looking for lemon squares and he finds Ghostface instead. Yep, I'm putting the mother and son screams back to back. You know what I just realized is weird about this character? He's 17 in the movie, which means he must have been 6 years old during Scream 4. It gives new context to Deputy Hicks's flirting with Dewey in the 4th one. Maybe she was looking for someone to fill the shoes of a father figure in her son's life. That didn't work out for her, and things don't work out for Wes either. This scream is a little lost under the sound effect, and the camera is turned away from him for half of it, so much like his mother, his one and only scream is not a memorable one. But he does have a huge presence in horror, and he got to be interviewed by Dax Flame. What an honor. Scream 3. Tyson Fox scares Sarah Darling with his scissors through the head prosthetic. These are both actors in Stab 3. We've had so many of these false screams at this point, I'm getting pretty tired of them. I'm realizing how overplayed this trope is, not just in Scream, but in horror in general. Has there ever been a false scare that's been one of the more memorable scares in the movie? I can't think of any. This isn't even a memorable scream in isolation. I expect better from someone whose character is a horror movie actress. Maybe her next scream will do a little bit more for me. Scream 3. Sarah Darling's fight with Ghostface. Her next scream did not do a little bit more for me. Sarah is on the phone with 911 and gives pretty much the same scream when she's wheeled into the next room. Then, during her fight with Ghostface, she screams pretty much the same way for a 3rd time. And has a couple smaller screams that follow that. This actress, Jenny McCarthy, basically has one scream and she does it every time. I can see why this is the only horror movie she's ever been in, unless we want to count Scary Movie 3, of course. Shortly before being killed in Scream 3, she complains about being cast in a horror movie, and now I'm wondering if that was part of her true feelings. Scream 3. Ghostface grabs Sidney while she's exploring the Woodsboro movie set. You always gotta be careful about getting grabbed in Hollywood. This scream is one of surprise, but I was surprised that she didn't give a bigger cry for help right here. It seems like even though there's nobody nearby, they're on a soundstage in a busy film studio, and her making a scene is what eventually causes the police and her honorary big brother Dewey to come crashing in and put a stop to the threat. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that when she was grabbed, she got the wind knocked out of her or something, but she could have been screaming a lot more. But hey, for the purposes of making this list, I'm kinda glad she didn't. I already got my hands full here. Scream 3, Gail bumps into the guillotine prop in John Milton's basement. This is just a standard scream, and I don't think we need to sit here and talk about it. Scream 5, Ghostface attacks Samantha Carpenter in the hospital. After her sister is hospitalized by a Ghostface attack, the new protagonist, Samantha Carpenter, has her own dangerous encounter while visiting said hospital. And this is kind of the problem with the Scream 5 style of requel, where they just recreate everything from the original film. This scene is just the same as Sydney's first time dodging the hunting knife, and the scream is not much different either.
You creep. I'm right here. Come and get me.
With pleasure.
It's the first Scream chronologically for both characters, but neither are that impressive. Scream 3, Dewey gets slashed by Roman. I think it's the first actual horror scream by Dewey in the franchise, and he doesn't overdo it. The guy just isn't a big screamer, despite David Arquette being a huge part of the horror genre. Scream 3, Sydney imagines Ghostface appearing at her window. This happens right after Sydney has the ghostly vision of her mother. She seems to be having some scary hallucination of her past trauma, and when Ghostface pops up and breaks her window, she lets out a little shriek. My reaction to this one is basically the same as Sydney's dog's reaction. Yep, something's happening, but I'm only invested in it for a few seconds, and then I'm going to the kitchen to beg for food. Scream 1, the party guests scream at Bob getting killed by Michael Myers in Halloween. I'll admit this one is fun because there are so many characters on screen, even though Stu and Randy are the only real characters here, but it really doesn't check any of the boxes that I'm looking for with a great scream. It's not blood curdling, it's not like a real threat, they're just reacting to a movie, it does nothing for the plot, it doesn't add to the horror, and the performances really aren't that good. The biggest reaction comes from this kid, which I believe is expelled student number 2. We'll get to his other scream later, but it's kind of over-exaggerated. No one is getting that much of a reaction from the Bob scene in Halloween. I mean, there are some fun details when you really study the scene. I never realized that Randy has his arm around a girl before. Could this be the fabled Karen Kolchak?
Giving up my virginity to Karen Kolchak at the video store was probably not a good idea.
These two on the left are not having it though. The overall bitch just laughs, and the chick with the Weezer blue top seems more annoyed at the other's reactions than anything. Anyway, next, Scream. To kick off the 3 out of 10 screams, we have Scream 6, the Spyglass Media Group logo. Not all screams have a random disconnected scream on the opening credits, but this one does. It sounds pretty good, but it's also kind of echoey and distant, so it loses out on all the points about horror, plot, and presentation. Scream 1, Sydney shrieks when Billy climbs into her window. This is just a short little shriek when Sydney gets startled by her boyfriend Billy while he's sneaking into her room. It's short, but I like the sound of it. It allows her to show off her pipes early in the movie. This is Sydney's first scream in the franchise. It's hard to justify ranking this very high because contextually she's screaming because of the misunderstanding, not because of any real imminent danger. That's not to say that Billy isn't dangerous, but he's not going after her right now. It does release a little bit of tension from the previous suspense, but I doubt that anyone got all that scared by it. All in all, one of the more average screams in the franchise. Scream 5, Richie gets sliced in the arm by Amber. When the power goes out and bodies start to drop at the hospital that Tara's being treated at, Richie Kirsch is called in to check on her, and that's when the other Ghostface strikes. But since Amber and Richie are actually partners in crime, she just cuts him on the arm so that he doesn't look guilty. It's the exact same tactic that Charlie and Jill used in Scream 4, but Richie's scream is much goofier than Jill's was, reflecting the dopey character persona he's trying to portray. As a result, the scream sounds like the noise you'd expect him to make upon finding out that his favorite Funko Pop is sold out or something. So it's not a particularly good scream, but I am bumping it up a tiny bit for being in line with the character he's trying to project, even if it was pretty obvious to us as the movie audience that he was the killer. Scream 2, Maureen Evans sees Casey get tackled in Stab. This is kind of a weird scream. It's more of a forgot to use oven mitts type scream than it is watching a scary movie type scream. Props for sounding unique, I guess, but I know she can do better, as we will see later on in this ranking. Scream 4, Deputy Hoss tries to wake a sleeping Deputy Perkins, but falls for his prank. Again, is anyone actually getting scared by these false scares? There have to be some effective ones, but I'm just not sure the Scream franchise is the best place to find them. Scream 6, Laura Crane gets startled by kids in an alley. Another Scream movie, another false scare. I will note that this character does have a couple of great screams that we'll get to later, so job well done by her for using an appropriately more tame one here when there's no actual danger, so that her true screams hit even harder when we get to them. Okay, I've got a series of Scream 3 screams that are just quintessential 3 out of 10s. Scream 3, Sydney shows up at the end to save her friends, but Ghostface strikes.
He's right there!
Scream 3, Sydney dekes Roman, causing him to crash through the window. Scream 3, Sydney sees Roman cut John Milton out of the picture. Okay, with those out of the way, we can move back to Scream 1. Ghostface comes out of Sydney's closet and swings a knife at her. This happens during Sydney's first call with Ghostface. After calling him a cretin, she goes back inside and locks the door, only to discover that the call was coming from inside the house. He swings a knife at her and she lets out a little shriek. While this one is the real deal in terms of actual danger, no one is citing this as evidence of Sydney's Scream Queen royalty. We'll get there later. Next, Scream 3. Ghostface comes out of Sydney's closet and swings a knife at her, the remake. The first time this happened, it was at Sydney's actual house, but now it's on the movie set version. But it's essentially the same moment being recreated. How cool would it have been if she did the exact same scream again? Well, she didn't do that. Let's play them both back to back so we can really compare. I wish I could say, look how far she's come as a Scream Queen, but neither of these are giving me any kind of goosebumps. I think the quality of her vocals in the Scream 3 version is probably a bit better, but we can hear it better in Scream 1, so honestly, it's a wash. Look at me, it sounds like I'm doing a pumpkin metal video, which is my other channel where I talk about pop punk and metal band history. Sydney's vocals sound much better during her third album, but you can't beat the production of the debut thanks to the stellar contribution of sound mixer Richard Bryce Goodman, best known for his work on The Hunt for Red October, where he was nominated for a Grammy. An Oscar. Scream 1, Billy startles Sydney as the party wraps up. With several students leaving the party, Billy gives a little yell to try to startle his girlfriend. Not very gentlemanly of him, after he just got done punching Stu for his lack of tact when discussing the murders at school earlier that day. Anyway, this is just a nothing burger scream, just intended to catch the audience off guard a little bit. I'm sure it made a few people jump, but the majority of us probably didn't get much of a jolt from it. I mean, Sid did, but once she realizes it's just Billy, the tension is immediately deflated. Scream 5, Samantha Carpenter fights back and takes out Richie. I definitely can't show this, but you're not missing much. When it comes to villain death screams, this is one of the more pathetic showings. I guess maybe it's fitting because Richie is one of the more pathetic villains, but his screams just make him sound like such a little bitch. He doesn't even fight back, he just squirms. Like the Reddit-pilled, Netflix-ingesting freak that he is. Scream 6, Sam finishes off Detective Bailey. At the end of Scream 6, Sam channels her inner Billy Loomis again and goes to town on Detective Bailey with a knife. It's basically the same thing that she did to his son Richie in the previous movie, and his scream sounds roughly the same. Like father, like son, I guess. I only like this one marginally better because it's a tiny bit less whiny. Scream 6, Tara stabs Ethan in the face.
In the face!
Tara Carpenter and her sister Sam find themselves outnumbered in the finale of Scream 6, but one by one they manage to take down the vengeful family of Ghostfaces that are after them. And it starts with this. Not a huge scream, but there's some energy behind it, I guess. Next, Scream 4. Jill opens the door to search for Charlie and Robbie and sees Sydney standing there instead. This is towards the end of the movie, and there's nothing special about the scream itself.
Jill. Sydney.
But from a rewatch standpoint, it could be seen as a fun little clue about Jill being guilty. Maybe opening the door and seeing someone standing there would be startling on its own, but given that her plan was to kill Sydney specifically, I could see her getting extra scared because of it. It's kind of like when you're crushing on someone and then they call your phone. It just activates the cardiac system a little bit. I wish this scream did the same, but it really doesn't do much for me. Scream 3. Roman shoots Sydney. I don't know if I can show this one, but I'll play the sound. Of course, watching this for the first time, we had no idea she was wearing a bulletproof vest, and some may have assumed that this could be the end of Sidney Prescott. It's fine as is, but it would have been a disappointing final scream if it had been her last. Scream 2. Gale bumps into Cotton Weary in the hall. Shortly after witnessing Dewey seemingly losing his life in the sound studio, Gale tries to sneak away before the knife finds her, but bumps right into Cotton Weary in the process, and his hands are covered in blood, which looks pretty sus. This one just sounds kind of whiny to me. I feel like it should have been a quick little high-pitched jolt. But after playing it back a couple times, it is better than no scream in the spot at all. So 3 out of 10 it is. is. Scream 1, One Last Scare. This is the moment where the supposedly dead killer comes back to life for one last scare. And despite Randy literally predicting that perfectly,
This is the moment when the supposedly dead killer comes back to life for one last scare.
Gail is still startled by the moment and lets out a little shriek. Nothing to write home about here, but I think it does do a little bit to add to the startle factor of this jump scare, if you want to call it that, because we knew it was coming. Moving on. Scream 4, Jill gets attacked by Ghostface at home. This one happens right after Sydney's cousin Jill witnesses her neighbor Olivia get killed. Sydney tries to protect her, but Ghostface gets a piece of Jill's arm. This was probably part of the plan, since Jill is the other Ghostface in this one. So in a way, this is similar to the screams heard when Billy and Stu injure each other to try to make themselves look innocent, only not as dramatic. We'll get to those later. Scream 6, Annika is thrown off the ladder. This comes as everyone tries to escape the apartment using the only exit they still have, a ladder connecting their apartments to the neighbors. It's not so much that this one is a bad scream, but she's falling away from us and we pretty much hear her voice fade into the distance. And since she's falling, we don't really get a good look at her expression or anything, so this really feels like more of a background scream. Besides that, she probably wasn't going to survive anyway after getting stabbed in the stomach, which we'll get to much later on in this ranking. But first, we've got the 4 out of 10 screams to sort through. Scream 3, Jennifer interrupts Dewey and Gail's kiss. Chronologically, this is only Dewey's second scream over the course of 3 movies, and like his first scream, which we'll get to shortly, it's mostly played for laughs, not horror. Which I don't mind, because that's just a part of Dewey's character, but it's also not winning him any gold medals. Scream 2, Ghostface misses Sydney and stabs the door instead. You know, for a movie series called Scream, they really like drowning out the main character's screams with music and sound effects. This one sounds like it honestly might have been a really cool wailing scream with some oscillation, but it just gets buried in the mix. Now I know how William Murderface felt when he first listened to the Death album. Shortly after, she has one more scream.
It's me, you okay?
This one is just a little yelp. The anxiety is already high from the attack that just happened, so this scream is more of a scare for Sydney than it is for us as the audience. And the way that it's shot backs that up. We're looking at the back of her head and we can clearly see that it's just Derek. I do kind of like the breathy whimpers that she lets out at the tail end of the scream. Please don't take this audio out of context, because they do a good job of illustrating the level of panic Sid is experiencing. This moment is truly her worst fear come true. She escaped Woodsboro, went to a whole new state, yet somehow her past followed her here, and she finds her life in danger once more. Scream 3, Dewey gets startled by Tyson Fox while searching John Milton's house. This is another very mid-Dewey scream that loses points on him getting startled rather than him genuinely getting scared. There are a few of these and I don't have anything special to say about this one. Let's keep it moving. Scream 2, drunk guy watching stab goes crazy for Casey getting stabbed. Okay, no one is arguing that this is an amazing scream or anything. It has 0 bites, it doesn't add anything to the story outside of just helping illustrate the general mayhem going on in that theater. It's not scary, and we don't see the actor's face. The reason this ranks above everything I've mentioned so far is solely just because it's funny. I don't know if this guy's actually drunk, but I imagine he is, because what would compel someone to have this caveman-aw reaction to a movie scene? I gotta play it back one more time. It just screams, "Me like movie." I mean, this guy makes the chicken jockey look tame by comparison. Okay, maybe not. Chicken jockey was kinda nuts. Scream 2, Cotton shoots Debbie and Sydney is thrown back. In the absolute final moment of Scream 2's finale, Debbie has Sydney at knife point, but Cotton saves the day by putting a bullet through her skull. The resulting blast knocks Sydney back with her, and the result is a cute little yelp from our protagonist. Yep, this technically qualifies as a scream and I have no other notes. Scream 5, Amber sees Mindy's injury. This happens near the climax of the movie. Several kills have already taken place and it looks like somebody tried to add Mindy Meeks to that list. Amber comes in and sees Sam tending to her, and this is her reaction.
What did you do to her?
But she knows that Sam is obviously not the killer, so this is just performative. As for the scream itself, perfectly serviceable and not very memorable. She's not even on screen during it, so it's not like it was supposed to be this huge moment. Scream 6, Gail gets stabbed. While Sam, Tara, and the others try to bait the killer so that they can trace a phone call, Ghostface is already one step ahead of them at Gail's apartment, where she almost suffers the same fate that Dewey did a year before. Her scream is not really a powerful one worthy of headlining a trailer or anything, but she just sounds tired. And after 6 movies of sidestepping the killer, she probably is. Points for realism. She's also being strangled, so that probably plays into her ability to really let one holler. Scream 4, Kirby and Jill see their friend Olivia get thrown out the window. I don't think I can show this, but the screams are mid. Just trust me. Here's the audio. Scream 5, Sydney tackles Amber. This one's obviously part of the final fight. I don't have much to add, and I'd rather save some time to elaborate on the good screams once we get to them. Scream 2, Ghostface attacks Gale in the film school lecture hall. There are so many of these obligatory screams that happen in tandem with the villain appearing for a jump scare that there's not much I can say to differentiate them. And keep in mind, you're seeing the list from worst to best scream, but I'm writing this in chronological order. I'm only on Scream 2 so far, and there are already so many of these nothing burger screams. They are necessary in my opinion, but they aren't screams that anyone is going to remember the next time they think of Scream 2. Next, Scream 1, the guy who dressed up as Ghostface at school and later got expelled. The day after Sydney was attacked at home, a couple of high school students wore Ghostface masks at school, and one of them ran through the halls screaming as a prank. This is honestly a nice, powerful scream, and if you're really on edge, maybe there was even a moment where this was scary before we turn and see that it's just a guy in a costume acting a fool. It quickly becomes clear that he's more interested in being a nuisance than he is actually scaring or hurting anyone. It's only disturbing to Sydney because of what happened to her mother, and now what's happening to her. So performance-wise, it's not a bad scream. It's impressively loud sounding, but it definitely loses some points because of the context under which we hear it. I can't drop it too far though, because it does lead to one of the funniest little lines.
It's like Christmas.
Stupidity leak.
When we later see the two kids who brought Ghostface masks to school in Principal Himbry's office, he expels both of them and tells them fairness would be to string them up in a tree. Naturally, I was curious which one of them was the screamer. Our only clue is that the screaming Ghostface seems to be wearing gray jeans, and the only one whose legs we see in Himbry's office is the one in the flannel who's wearing blue jeans. So I assume the other kid is the screamer. They're just credited as expelled teen number 1 and expelled teen number 2. I believe this is expelled teen number 2, Ryan Kennedy, who had a few other roles but is still best known for his role as the screaming Ghostface in Scream. I believe there's only one other scream that comes from a costumed Ghostface, and that honor goes to Roman, which we'll get to in about 4 screams. We can hear Mickey Altieri grunt at times in Scream 2, but again, a grunt is not a scream. But hey, who would have thought that expelled teen number 2 would be so well represented on this list? Scream 2, Sydney screams at Ghostface attacking her security detail. Even a pretty average scream can be good when Neve Campbell is the one producing it. But this one falls just short of that mark because they cut away from her so fast in the edit. I do like what it adds to the scene though. If we were to re-edit this without Sid's scream, it feels kind of goofy, like something that might be in Scary Movie instead of Scream, which I guess is entirely appropriate and kind of the point. The franchise called Scream probably should have screams. Scream 1, Stu's screams during his final fight with Sydney. There are a lot of little screams that Stu gives us here in a 17-second period, so I decided to group them together. She punches him in the side or something, he gives a little scream. He screams as he tackles her over the couch. But the highlight here is the moment where she bites his hand. You can hear some of the pain in his voice, but like many of the other screams that we get from Stu, the quality of the scream is reduced because it sounds like he's losing his voice. I guess that makes sense because we're really getting down to the end of the night and the end of the struggle. I mean, I'll tend to lose my voice at a loud party, and that's without me having to fight for my life or get stabbed. Please note that this grouping of screams from their final fight does not include Stu's final scream. We'll get to that a little bit later. Scream 1, Randy sneaks up on Gale as she's calling the police.
Let's go.
Our first Gale Weathers scream in the franchise, but it's not really a full-on horror scream. I think Gale has realized at this point that she's pretty much on her own if she wants to survive. So this isn't a scream for attention, it's more of a scream because she's genuinely surprised. While there certainly is danger in the situation, I mean, she's literally sitting in a news truck with the windshield completely covered in blood, she's reacting to Randy, who as we know is not the threat that she should be worried about. Still, I could see his appearance giving some people a little scare back in 1996. Scream 3, Gale and Roman scream in tandem when Roman regains consciousness. During the climax, Roman gets knocked out in the Ghostface costume after he and Gale take a tumble into the basement, and when he comes to, they both scream simultaneously. Props to this for being a rare combination of characters, but it doesn't have much else going for it. Scream 6, Tara and Sam startle each other at the movie theater. During the finale at the theater, Tara and Chad try to flee after fighting off a Ghostface killer and get a jolt of adrenaline upon opening the door. I know I've complained a lot about so many of the scares coming from characters startling each other, but at least with this one, it's more understandable, because they definitely are in a tense and dangerous situation, seeing as how the killers are in the room with them. The scene is meant to be chaotic, and freaking each other out just adds to the chaos a little bit. Scream 2, Hallie screams at Ghostface attacking Sid's police protection. Sydney's college roommate, Hallie McDaniel, only gets one scene where she gets to scream, and she definitely goes for quantity over quality. She's hollering throughout the entire ordeal of Ghostface breaking into their car. I think she does a great job of being kind of a human danger barometer. Throughout the scene, her voice is in the background, projecting a picture of certain doom. But because of that, she never really gets her moment in the sun to give us an unforgettable scream worthy of the name on the poster. Scream 2, Sydney screams as she cuts the rope. During the final battle of Scream 2, Sydney is backstage and starts cutting ropes down with an axe, causing the Agamemnon set to collapse all around the evil Debbie Salt / Debbie Loomis. When she cuts this one down, she screams, and while it's not really a reaction to anything, doesn't represent an immediate danger, and isn't really played for horror, it is one of the more unique screams in the series, because it's a guttural release of anger and frustration. This is Sydney letting it all out. Does anyone remember that meme of the women who paid $4,000 to go on a rage retreat, and it's basically just like Karen crash outs, but the crash outs are happening actually in nature instead of in natural grocers? It's basically like that, except instead of being mad that her husband took her to Cancun instead of the Maldives, Sydney is releasing the rage of the last 2 years of her life being absolutely terrorized by the Loomis family and their cohorts, which in my opinion is a lot more valid. Scream 3, Bye Bye Angelina. This one's basically the last piece of evidence I needed chronologically to prove that the Stab 3 actors in Scream 3 are not the most talented bunch when it comes to convincing horror movie screams, at least in universe. I don't know about the actors themselves, and I'm not about to show up to their houses in the middle of the night to find out. No, what makes this scream interesting is the implications that it has on the fan theory that Angelina is the second Ghostface in 1999. It almost seems rehearsed to me, that she and Roman were supposed to meet in this hallway so that they could fake her death. She just kind of stops, and then I'm not sure if she was expecting him to actually attack her, or if that part was also rehearsed too. But the whole interaction just feels a little off. Maybe that's just me though. Scream 1, Tatum Riley's screaming as she gets lifted by the garage door. It's a shame we only get one set of Tatum screams before she gets her neck broken by the Mocker's garage door frame. We actually hear her whimpering a little bit when she first gets stuck in the doggy door, but her main scream comes when her feet are lifted off the ground and she realizes she's not gonna get out on her own. She's got a pretty nice screaming voice, I gotta admit. I like the sense of panic that we hear in her voice, but at the end of the day, it's not a very long scream, and it comes after her physical altercation with Ghostface. The horror has already deflated at this point, so this part is really more about the suspense of seeing if she'll be able to free herself before getting cracked open by the lift. And with a set of lungs like those, it's not very likely. All right, we're halfway there, which means you've officially reached the better half of the video. These are the 5 out of 10 screams. Scream 3, Dewey gets startled by Tom Prince and points a gun at him. Remember that earlier entry when I said that the Scream 3 actors were surprisingly undramatic with their jump scare screams, and I criticized Jennifer Jolie's reaction to having a gun pointed at her face? Well, 2 seconds later, the same thing happens, but with Tom Prince, who gives a much better scream. But at the end of the day, it's still another false scare. I love how Dewey points his gun at everyone except Angelina Tyler, who, as I mentioned, is absolutely a secret Ghostface in Scream 3. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch my Scream 3 things you missed. Pretty sure that's where I talk about it. Scream 3, Martha's appearance on the studio backlot startles Dewey. Dewey's third canonical scream comes very shortly after his second, and as usual, it's at his expense for laughs rather than being an actual scary moment or dangerous threat. But I can't really hate on it because the noise he makes as a 28-year-old security guard here is kind of funny.
Dude, sorry.
Also, I love how the police take notice of this and her response is, "Don't shoot, I'm only 17. As if her being a year older would make it totally okay to shoot her. Scream 2, Sydney sees Ghostface during the rehearsal of her play. Oh look, another Sydney scream drowned out in the audio mix. At least you can kind of hear that this one has some oomph to it. It's also kind of unique in the way that it's implemented. Most screams happen after a surprise or jump scare, and the thrill level of the scene ramps up after that. But this one is more of an exclamation point. Sydney is in the midst of this panic, swirling with dramatic music and masked characters with knives. But when she sees Ghostface, she screams and everything stops, which I think helps it feel a little bit more impactful. Scream 6, the bodega cashier gets stabbed in the chest. Yep, that's a basic scream for a guy who got stabbed in the chest. Scream 1, Sydney screams when she sees Dewey holding the Ghostface mask. This is probably Sydney's best showing in the Ghostface encounter scene at her house. I wouldn't describe it as being piercing or blood-curdling, and she almost sounds more disgusted and horrified than anything. It's not just a yell though, there's definitely a little bit of bite to it. It's a good example of her range as a screamer. God, this is such a stupid video. There is a slight moment of horror in this scream, but ultimately, the tension ends up being diffused immediately when we realize that it's not actually Ghostface, and it's just Deputy Dewey showing up at the door with a scream of his own. Scream 2, Phil Stevens jump scares Maureen Evans outside the cinema. This is another one of those non-malicious characters trying to scare another character moments. It's interesting how when you're trying to scare someone, you do more of an ah, but when you're getting scared, it's more of an ee. I can't do it because I don't get scared. I do like how the scare is momentarily extended because he doesn't take his mask off right away, but at the end of the day, you left the movie you really wanted to see just to scare your date? Like, dude, you're actively missing the movie right now. It's going on behind that door. You are the one who wanted to come here. Do people just miss parts of the movie that they came for? This has always bothered me. I don't care how bad I have to pee, I will sit and see the entire film. Scream 2, Mickey Altieri comes back for one last scare. The very last scream in Scream 2 comes in the form of the obligatory one last scare. Gil and Sidney already learned that the killer always comes back in the first movie. The surprise here is that it's not the main antagonist, it's the side ghost face, Mickey, who has already taken quite a beating to this point. That doesn't stop him from popping to life like a zombie and screaming before promptly getting blown away by the two heroines. I do like this one, but I can't help but think it's less about the scream itself and more about Mickey's unsightly appearance. I guess that's kind of part of it, but if you took away the effects makeup and sound effects, I can't help but feel this would have amateur scare actor audition energy. Plus, I get that there has to be one last scare, but it would have made a lot more sense for him to quietly try to sneak up on them rather than immediately screaming as he comes back to life. I guess there's a reason that nobody is hyping up Mickey Altieri as the smartest Ghostface. Scream 3, Angelina Tyler pops out of a secret passage. Sorry. Guys, I don't know. I've been listening to screams for like 3 days straight. This one was fine, okay? It was fine. Scream 5, Amber stabs Gail into the fridge. At some point, we need to talk about Amber. She's an actual killing machine. Like, only Roman has more kills than her. This one doesn't result in a kill though. I guess Gail Weathers' death was not in the forecast, but it does result in a mid-scream from her. It's probably not easy to scream while there's a knife in your side, so I imagine this one is kind of a realistic performance. It definitely kind of gets lost in the chaos of this final fight though. Scream 1, Stu tackles Sydney. After losing a little too much blood from Billy's overzealous knife wound, Stu stumbles into the room, sees his buddy has been defeated, and charges at Sydney for revenge. On one hand, I have to give this one credit for being one of the more sustained screams, and it's the first scream we get from Matthew Lillard, but I do have a couple issues with it. For one, it just isn't that loud or impressive. You could easily chalk this up to the fact that he's lost a lot of blood and thinks that he's dying, so he might not have the energy or oxygen in his diaphragm to deliver a truly incredible scream right here. The other thing that I take issue with is that it just doesn't seem that necessary. It feels like him just trying to be a macho man. He could have easily just tackled her without screaming and probably conserved some energy for the actual fight, but cinematically, the scream does add to the drama quite a bit. If this part was silent, it just wouldn't feel as intense. So I've been kind of back and forth on this one. I'm just gonna stick it in the middle as a 5 out of 10. Scream 2, Maureen Evans freaks out right before Casey gets stabbed in Stab. This is a better scream than her first scream when Casey got tackled, but it's still not an ear-shattering sound. I do think that the performance is pretty good. It's believable that a non-horror fan would have that kind of reaction, but it's also just harder for it to stand out above the screams coming from other people in the audience, and the screams coming from the movie, which again do not count because I'm not counting screams that come from movies within the movie. Scream 4, Ghostface goes after Sydney, Jill, and Kirby. Things go a little crazy in Woodsboro at the end of Scream 4. After Sydney shows up at Kirby Reed's house, the location of the Stabathon after party, Robbie Mercer is killed, and a man in a Ghostface mask charges the front door. While I do think this is an appropriate place for all of them to scream, these short little shrieks aren't gonna win anyone an Oscar, or even a Saturn, or a Fangoria Chainsaw Award, or a Dead Meat Horror Award. I should know, I was a judge last year. Still, I do appreciate screams that contribute to the general level of panic or chaos in a scene, and these screams do what they're supposed to. Scream 6, Sam does something about Ethan. After the big reveal that it was 3 Ghostfaces this time, not 2, a now unmasked Ethan Landry goads Sam into a fight, which doesn't seem wise because she has a knife and he doesn't. This goes about as well for him as you'd expect.
What are you gonna do about it?
If there's anything I've noticed about Sam, it's that she likes to do many short stabs instead of one big rip and slash, and her targets respond accordingly. I'm placing this here because his screams are frantic, but they're also a lot more dignified than the ones produced by his older brother the year before. Scream 1, Stu stabs Billy. At the end of Scream 1, Billy and Stu give each other a couple knife wounds so that they can make it look like they were actually victims, not villains by the time that the police show up. Stu gives more of a grunt when Billy stabs him, clearly not pleased by how hard his partner in crime went. So when it's his turn to stab Billy, he takes the moment to get a little revenge, causing Billy to yell out in pain. I'll give this one some props for being a pretty convincing performance from Skeet Ulrich, but it doesn't really do much for me in the context of the movie. We know it's coming, and this moment is more about gore and discomfort than it is about shock and horror. Billy's scream reflects that. It's got more of a little kid who just took a nutshot energy, as opposed to the scared for my life energy that I'm looking for when rating these screams. It fits the situation nicely, it's just not the type of scream that ranks higher than a 5 out of 10 in a huge list of every scream in the Scream franchise. Scream 5, Sydney and Gail hear a scream echo out from the Mocker house.
Sounds about right.
We aren't close to the action, we don't really even know who screamed it, I think it's Amber, and it really only contributes to the ambiance and isn't plot relevant. But I just think this one is cool. The crickets chirping outside in the calm of night, and the distant sounds of a blood-curdling scream to soothe the soul. Someone should make a video called 10 hours of crickets chirping outside the Mocker house interrupted by occasional screams of agony. This one just has that aura to it. I like when movies acknowledge a moment of calm before things hit the fan.
You ready for this?
Scream 2, Gail sees Dewey get stabbed by Ghostface while she's isolated in the recording studio. I can't in good faith really give this one that much credit due to the sole fact that we don't even hear the scream, we just see it. Gail hides from her attacker in a sound isolating recording studio, and she's helpless to intervene when Dewey gets the knife on the other side of the glass. We see it from Dewey's perspective. Gail clearly lets out a gut-wrenching scream, but it's completely silent and relies entirely on facial reaction to sell the moment. Here's why I like this one. Does anyone remember in my Saw X Things You Missed where I talked about how I like how a series called Saw has featured so many different types of saws? As a side note, I love how we're making our way through the compendium of different types of saws, whether it be hacksaw, circle saw, buzz saw, power saw, or now jiggly saw. I think one of the few ones that hasn't been used yet, ironically, is a jigsaw. In that same sense, I appreciate the Scream franchise featuring a wide variety of screams, whether that be shrieks, yells, yelps, squeals, squalls, or any of the other verbs that I've come up with to describe screams throughout this video. But this is the most unique scream we've gotten yet, the silent scream, and for the sake of variety, I definitely appreciate that. Scream 4, Jill jams her knee into Sydney's uterus. Okay, fine, it's not her uterus, it's the open stab wound that she incurred earlier. This is the last scream of Scream 4, the last scream that Wes Craven would ever direct, and it certainly doesn't go out on a high note like the final hollers from the previous movies. Well, yeah, technically it is a high note. It's a high-pitched scream. It even has some blood-curdling quality to it. I think Nev did a good job using her scream vocal to communicate pain. But there isn't a big one last scare moment to go out on like in the original trilogy.
Consider this an alternate ending.
Surprisingly, the rest of the movie is completely devoid of any more screams. Jill does seem to have one last burst of life after seemingly kicking the bucket, but there's no scare associated with it. She tries to sneak up on Sydney, who's been through this enough times to know that she's coming. No scream necessary. Scream 5, Chad gets stabbed in the thigh. There ends up being this house party held in honor of Wes's memory, which I'm not a huge fan of, but they needed an excuse to have a house party because there's a house party in Scream 1 and this is a requel. Long story short, Chad goes outside to look for his girlfriend after a fight and instead finds a new ghost-faced friend. And I like this scream. It's different from the 100 other screams we hear when characters get stabbed, and it feels like it fits his character nicely. It's the type of scream you hear when an athlete gets injured on the field, and for a character who spends most of the movie in a Letterman jacket, it feels like an excellent choice. Scream 1, Deputy Dewey answers the 911 call. This happens after Sydney runs down the stairs to get away from Billy, who she becomes suspicious of when he appears at her bedroom window shortly after the Ghostface attack. When Sydney opens the door and sees him holding the Ghostface mask, she screams, which startles Dewey, causing him to let out a scream of his own. It's not winning any points for its effectiveness as a horror scream, that's for sure. It's more of a comedy scream than anything, but I still think that it deserves to be ranked pretty highly because it does a perfect job of telling us something about the character. Dewey is known in Scream for being kind of doofy. He's an inexperienced rookie cop in a small town. He eats ice cream while the sheriff smokes cigarettes. He's probably not accustomed to being on a serious case with real danger involved, and it tells us everything we need to know about him. It's better than any exposition we could have asked for. But at the end of the day, I can't really put it any higher because I can't really take it that seriously. He's also out of focus during it. I never really noticed that until now. The next two categories will be 6, followed by 7. Scream 6, Mindy encounters Ghostface in the bathroom. Well, that's a lot better than her other Scream in this movie, even if it is a lot less Nintendo 64 kid coded. Scream 6, Quinn tries to rush Sam. This trope of the knife-wielding killer going feral and screaming as he or she rushes one of the heroes has appeared a few times in the Scream franchise. First Roman, then Amber, and now Quinn. It always ends the same way, with them getting shot. While Roman and Amber's versions of such scenes are some of the more iconic ones that I'll get to later in the ranking, Quinn's, I can't really name anything that special about it. I like her dad's facial expression when she drops out of frame though. That could be a reaction meme in the future. Scream 3, the cast of Stab 3 freaks out when the power goes out. This occurs during the so-called rap party at Jennifer's house after the production on Stab 3 is shut down. Roman cuts the power, drawing reactions from everyone involved.
Don't panic.
I mentioned earlier that none of the Stab 3 cast members are particularly expressive screamers with the possible exception of Tom Prince, but there's something about a group of people screaming that seems to allow them to multiply off one another's energy. There's also this superfluous scream when Jennifer rushes to the fax machine moments later. But I don't know who it comes from and it's completely unimportant, so I'm grouping it as part of the aftermath of this group scream.
What's it say?
Dear pesky plumbers.
Scream 4, Olivia Morris gets attacked in her room. This is another one where there's not one hero scream, but rather a series of screams. Here's the thing with this one. The POV of the camera jumps around a lot. We see parts in the room with Olivia, parts across the street with Kirby and Jill, and even hear her in another part of the house where Sydney reacts. So while there wasn't one big scream for the actress to put on her reel, from an in-universe standpoint, we can say she was one of the more prolific screamers. I think that's gotta be worth something. Also, Olivia and I are related. I mean, I assume we are since we have the same last name. Scream 5, Amber tries to play the victim. When Sydney and Gail show up to the Mocker house to try to put a stop to the newest set of murders, Amber Freeman stumbles out the door, screaming for their sympathy.
What do you think? Trap?
I kinda like the sound of it, but it's not very convincing. And considering that it wasn't even convincing enough to fool the characters in the movie, I guess I'm not alone on that. Scream 6, Quinn screams behind a closed door to make it look like she'd been killed. While an off-camera kill is immediately suspicious to me as an audience member who's trying to figure out who the killer might be, I can't say that her performance as a screamer added to that suspicion at all. It's convincing, it has that kind of agonizing sound, and honestly, it would probably be ranked higher if it was a real reaction to danger and if it was performed on camera. Next, Scream. Scream 2, the whole theater screams when Ghostface appears in Stab. I kinda don't know how to rank this because it's a whole theater doing the screaming. I mean, it sounds cool, but it could just be a sound effect for all we know. There are 3 of these throughout the opening of Stab, so I'll just group them all together for the purposes of this ranking. During the scene slightly after this where Ghostface is killing Casey Becker, there are constant screams from the entire audience. For obvious reasons, I won't be able to separate and rank those individually. How boring would that be? So I'll just lump them together in this entry. Scream 2, girl seeing Stab reacts to Casey's door getting shattered. I know I just did a collective entry for the theater screaming, but this girl I decided to separate out because we can clearly hear and differentiate her scream. And I like the face she makes when she gets scared. This is the type of footage you see in those horror movie commercials trying to convince you that their movie is the scariest movie of the year, which seems to happen about 10 times a year these days. I tried to find this actress, but couldn't definitively determine who it was. So, on to the next one. Scream 6, Jason Carvey gets stabbed in the back, literally. Oh yeah, there are 2 opening kills in Scream 6. Jason's death is kind of a best of both worlds as far as the screams are concerned. There's one bigger one when he takes the first hit. Then he endures repeated attacks, so we get to hear what the prolonged series of screams sound like. The last one leads into this transition and becomes a title card scream. But unfortunately, it gets faded out in favor of the music. After so many screams, I'm desperate for any form of variety, so it's kind of interesting to have the first ever male title card scream in the series. All of the others were female, except for Scream 3, which didn't have one at all. Yeah, I think this guy did a fine job. He's played by Tony Revolori, and it was his first horror movie, except for Run, where he just had a voice part. Scream 4. The crowd panics when Rebecca's remains are thrown onto a press conference. This threw me for a loop the first time I saw it because it's shortly after seeing Sydney's publicist Rebecca get killed. But the first woman in the crowd who screams sounds pretty much the same as Rebecca, so I thought she came back to life for a second. Anyway, this is a cool moment because we get a Dewey scream, a Gale scream, and a crowd scream all rolled into one event. But as is often the case with group screams, none of them stand out in particular. Scream 6. Tara gets stabbed while kissing Chad. Talk about a cockblock.
Did I cockblock you?
Tara hasn't screamed once in Scream 6 until this moment, which is an hour and 35 minutes into the movie. Though her sister Sam is the main protagonist in 5 and 6, they're generally both considered to be the new Scream Queens. But neither one of them does a whole lot of screaming. Scream 5. Bye bye, Deputy Dewey. After rushing back to the hospital to save Tara from an in-progress Ghostface attack, Dewey brings a gun to a knife fight and somehow still loses. No way in hell I'm getting away with showing this one, so here's the audio from his scream. As one of the only 3 surviving characters from the original trio, Dewey's death is incredibly significant, and this is conveyed through the fact that his scream is his most serious and mature-sounding one in the series, which stands in sharp contrast with his other screams, which are usually goofy squawks of him getting startled by his allies. It's a reflection of his maturation as a character. No longer is he the ice cream licking rookie of 1996. He led the charge into danger, knowing the risk, and eventually his luck caught up with him. He doesn't go out with a huge hero scream, thus the mid position on this list, but for Dewey, it's honestly better that he didn't. A more dignified, subdued ending is more befitting of his character. Rip Dewey Riley. Scream 2. Maureen Evans realizes she's sitting next to the real killer. After several screams reacting to the movie Stab, Maureen spots blood on her hands picked up off the jacket of her date. By the time she notices, it's too late, and Ghostface sticks a knife into her gut, but not before she lets out a classic squeal of horror. Which no one notices, because the whole theater is going crazy for the movie. It's a good sounding scream, but it does sound a little performative. More of a theme park scream. It works here though. She's trying to draw attention to the danger, but can't because of the raucous theater. Scream 4. Jill stabs her own shoulder so that she can look like a victim. Like Billy and Stu from the first movie, Jill wants to create the illusion that she's actually a victim. But, unlike Billy, she already killed off her partner so that she could have all of the fame as a lone survivor. So when it comes to making herself look beat up for the press, she doesn't have anyone to help her, other than this wall. It's a sharp, good-sounding vocal performance that communicates the pain that she's feeling. But does it really live up to the expectation of what Emma Roberts in a Scream movie should have been able to do? No, I don't think it does. The thing is, Emma Roberts was a Nickelodeon star who was also in numerous comedies in the 2000s decade. I believe Scream 4 was her first horror project that opened the door for her roles in The Blackcoat's Daughter, Nerve, The Hunt, Abandoned, and at least 6 seasons of American Horror Story, and an appearance in Fox's satirical comedy slasher series, Scream Queens, which I just found out is completely different from VH1's competition reality show Scream Queens, which Roberts is not in. But still, I find it ironic that she only has 5 screams in the movie, and they're all just small little average or below average squelches until this one, and even that is like a 6 out of 10 when it's all said and done. And that was apparently the performance that showed everyone what an iconic Scream Queen she is and earned her the role on the show Scream Queens. I guess there's more to being a Scream Queen than literally just having the ability to scream. Speaking of which, let's move on to our next scream. Scream 3. Sydney pops up from behind the bar to strike down Roman. Though it appeared she'd been shot, we know something is up when her body disappears and Roman gets an incoming call from her cell. It must have been a cathartic one for her, to finally turn the knife around on the man most responsible for all of her psychological scars. Scream 3. Christine defends herself with a golf club. In the opening of Scream 3, Ghostface uses a voice changer on Cotton Weary's girlfriend Christine, so when Cotton actually gets home, she thinks he's the one trying to kill her and defends herself with a 9-iron. No, I do not actually know if that's a 9-iron, I just said that even though I don't golf. She screams as she swings and takes out a paper tray. That must have been fun to film. It's one of a few examples of a character screaming while on the attack rather than while being attacked. And it got me thinking about weightlifters who grunt or yell during a heavy lift, or the vocal sounds you hear from linemen trying to get an advantage in a football game, or most famously, tennis players doing just about anything. Is this just something people do because they've seen others do it, or is there some science behind it? I found a study on it that basically said that yes, you can get a small buff from yelling because it forces you to take in more oxygen, which increases the output of your heart. Unfortunately for Christine, it was directed at the wrong person. We'll put a pin in this and revisit Christine for her next scream later. Scream 1. Gail and Randy see Neil Prescott escape from the closet. The final screams of the original Scream. Sydney's kidnapped father busts out of the closet after Billy and Stu have been defeated, but Gail and Randy are still feeling pretty jumpy and both let out a pretty decent holler. I appreciated that they tried to subvert expectations by giving us a bonus scare after our obligatory one last scare moment. And it's for that same reason that these screams were never going to be the screams of the crop. It's another example of what I would call a false scream, where the character is startled, but it's just an attempt to give the audience a jolt, because there's no real tension or danger at this point. It is a rare example of a joint collaboration between the screaming voices of Randy and Gail though, and for that I have to give it some credit. Scream 2. Ghostface throws Cece through the balcony window. There really is a lot of defenestration at the beginning of Scream 2. Not approaching Jason Voorhees levels or anything, but enough to make me take notice. As for Cece's scream, it's a pretty good one from Sarah Michelle Gellar, only held back by the fact that we don't really see her face during it and the fact that it's partially overpowered by the sound of the breaking glass. And we've reached the 7 out of 10 screams. This is where things really start getting good. Scream 4. The crowd reacts to a jump scare in Stab 1. This is a pretty lively reaction from the Woodsboro High student body while watching the movie at the Cinema Club Stabathon event, which doesn't make sense. Haven't you seen the movie before? Isn't Stab pretty much a classic within the Scream universe, to the same level that Scream is a classic in our universe? They're all reciting the dialogue in Stab, so they must have seen it.
You know, I don't even know you. And I just like you.
Props to them for getting into it, I guess, but how are you that jumpy? One of the cool things about this scene is we can actually compare it to their reaction to the Ohio crowd who is seeing the movie for the first time. It's the same moment where that girl reacts to Casey's door getting shattered. Despite that one having a pretty good reaction, the overall crowd reaction was bigger in Scream 4, even though they knew exactly what was coming. Despite the flawed logic, bigger reaction equals bigger scream, so I'm ranking this a point higher than the Scream 2 equivalent. Scream 6. Gail's boyfriend is thrown through the bookshelf. I've been sitting here trying to think of something interesting to say about this scream, but I've already done 145 of these at this point, and then I got distracted and watched a 20-minute YouTube video. Oh, look, here's the scream. It's fine, okay? The scream's fine. Scream 6. Tara slips from the balcony. In the midst of the final showdown at the theater, Tara and Sam look for an exit via the upper balcony, and Tara nearly exits the world of the living when she slips from the ledge. To make matters worse, Ethan looms below her, ready to stick something into her the moment that she falls.
I've always wanted to stick something in you, Tara!
The first scream gets buried under the sound effects a little bit, but I like the second. Jenna Ortega is really good at putting those extra little touches on a scream. You can sense her hyperventilating under her cries of despair, which really adds intensity to the situation. Thankfully, I'm just here to judge the screams, because if I wasn't, I'd have to go on another tangent about the dangling from a ledge trope, so we can just move on. Scream 6. Ethan's one last scare. Holy crap, I made it to what is currently the final scream in the whole dang Scream franchise. Like so many of the screams that preceded it, it ends on a one last scare moment, this time from Ethan Landry. It's another one of those where it's like, in a realistic sense, why are you screaming? And as a result, it's another one of those that just has more of a Six Flags scare actor energy when you'd hope that it would have a $35 million movie energy. But in another similarity to Mickey Altieri's one last scare, I do like the lighting and makeup on him here. And that's gotta be good for something. It's my video. If you don't like it, too bad. Still like and subscribe. Scream 3. Jennifer Jolie encounters Ghostface on the stairs. This is her last moment before Roman corners her in the secret passage and kills her. And there's another scream when he catches up to her in the closet. Although we, the audience, are able to hear a pretty solid cry from Jennifer, it must not have been that loud in universe, because it isn't enough to raise the alarm.
Do you hear something?
Scream 1. The scream heard under the title screen. Not only is this the very first scream we hear in the whole Scream franchise, but it's a pretty good one in terms of blood-curdliness. It sounds like someone's really screaming for their life, which in a horror movie called Scream, that's exactly what I want to hear. It does get washed out a little bit by the sound of the phone though, and it's just used as more of a sound effect. It doesn't actually exist in the context of the Scream continuity, so I feel like I have to dock some points for that. Obviously, it doesn't have anything to do with the plot, but as a table setter, I'd say this does its job just fine. Scream 3. Gail and Jennifer react to seeing Dewdrop get knocked out. This is one of several joint screams between Gail and Jennifer during the finale. Scream 4. Ghostface targets Rebecca Walters. Again, this is Sydney's publicist who's in the parking structure when she's targeted by the killer. The scream is solid, she looks pretty freaked out, and as a bonus, I like the fact that her car is shaking up and down in frame, giving us the feeling that things are going out of control. During that same scene, we get a similar scream where her car alarm goes off. And the completion of the Rebecca Walters trilogy when the antagonist turns her stomach into a knife slot. Thank you for your service, Allison Brie. This was not her first horror role. That came in a 2008 Screamfest entry called Parasomnia. From what I understand, it's a small part, but I needed you to know that the movie she was in was in a festival called Screamfest. No, I'm not getting paid every time I use the word scream, but it is used 965 times in this video. At the time of writing, Allison was most recently in a 2025 horror movie called Together. Scream 1. Gail almost runs over Sydney while fleeing the house. This one is pretty self-explanatory. Gail is still in hysterics after getting jump-scared by Randy and seeing the corpse of her cameraman Kenny moments earlier. When she sees an injured Sydney Prescott stumble out onto the street, she gives almost as big of a scream. It's almost like she thought Sydney was a threat for a moment, and just goes to show how hysterical she was in that situation, jumping and, I guess, screaming at everything that moves. It's more of a quick scream, which is appropriate for the situation, but the edit cuts so fast that we don't really see her full reaction, making it hard to put this in that top tier. But still, in the brief moment where we see her, she looks genuinely terrified. A great performance from Courtney Cox in her first horror movie. There's also another scream she gives as the van is crashing, which sounds pretty good, but again, she's only on screen for a fraction of a second, so I'm gonna move on. Scream 2. Ghostface comes out of the sorority house's closet and swings a knife at CC Cooper. This is basically the same exact scenario that Sydney was in the first movie, but CC's scream is so much better. The sound is perfect. It's the type of scream that if you heard it coming from a house while walking down the street, you'd immediately have to consider calling the cops. I think her reaction is great, and combined with the appearance of Ghostface, this is a pretty good horror moment. I'm not factoring props into my ranking, but shout out to the see-through 90s phone. I love to see it. I know it probably seems like she's punching above her weight in terms of screams here, and even kind of outshining Neve at times, but let's not forget that she was no stranger to the horror genre going into this, having appeared in Buffy the Vampire Slayer and I Know What You Did Last Summer before her role in Scream 2. And making this video is how I learned that her very first role came from a Burger King commercial.
Do I look 20% smaller to you? I must to McDonald's. When I order a regular burger at McDonald's, they make it with 20% less meat than Burger King. Unbelievable.
Aw, how cute. I can't wait to see her get stabbed and thrown off a balcony one day. Scream 2. CC Cooper is stabbed and thrown from the balcony. While I did prefer CC's closet jump scare over Sydney's equivalent, her being thrown from a building scream doesn't quite live up to the performance given by Neve a year prior. We haven't gotten there yet. But this CC scream is still pretty good. I guess I would have preferred a high-pitched scream with a little more kick, or a more agonized scream with some grit in there to really do the death of CC Cooper justice, but it is a nice long scream at 5 seconds, it's visually pretty awesome, and I do enjoy how abruptly it gets cut short when she hits the ground. It really sells the brutality of the death, even if we don't see it.
Brutality!
All in all, a good trilogy of screams from Sarah Michelle Gellar. Scream 3. Sydney is haunted by the memory of her mother and kinda jumps out the window again. This comes at the tail end of Roman and Angelina chasing her through the Hollywood movie set version of her house, and likely another hallucination of her mom. But this time we get a much better scream out of her. There have been many videos where I've discussed the parallels between the Scream franchise and the Star Wars franchise. They lean into it a lot in Scream 3, since Scream 3 is all about being the final chapter of the trilogy, and the original Star Wars trilogy is perhaps the most iconic trilogy ever. They even feature Carrie Fisher as a cameo in Scream 3. So it's only appropriate that Sid's scream here, after being confronted with a specter of her dead mother, sounds very similar to Luke Skywalker's scream after his confrontation with the father who he believed to be dead. Not sure if that's intentional, but the inflection in their voices is undeniably similar. Aside from that, it's a good scream from Neve Campbell, elevating the horror as she panics and tumbles out the window and moving the plot forward. This scream is what gets the attention of Dewey and the LAPD guys and consequently saves her life. Scream 4. Jenny Randall's friend Marnie gets thrown through her window. This is the first canon scream of movie number 4, after a couple fake outs that turned out to be footage from Stab 6 and Stab 7. And I think she did a great job, giving us a sharp, high-pitched shriek with an erratic body reaction to really sell her fear. I guess Hollywood agreed, as she's also appeared in several other horror projects, like For Sale by Owner, Beneath the Darkness, and Rings. Scream 2, Gale sees Randy's corpse in the news van. You can always count on Gale to give us a big old scream after discovering the bloody remains of someone she knows. This one isn't gonna be as high as other entries on this ranking, because this one does feel a little bit more manufactured. Like it's not a genuine reaction. Wes Craven clearly just wanted a big scream right here and had Courtney Cox step up to her mark, time everything perfectly, and belt one out. It is a big scream, don't get me wrong, but I feel like if I saw the cracked window of a news van and then opened it up and saw what was once Randy Meeks, my reaction would be more of a, oh. I wouldn't be like winding up and just blasting out a huge ah! But let me know if I'm in the minority on that. Scream 2, Derek gets shot and Sydney loses it. After an entire movie of wondering if Derek could be one of the Ghostface killers, the issue is pretty much put to rest when he takes a bullet through the chest. And nobody was more shocked and horrified than his girlfriend, Sydney. While this quality is probably true of a lot of her work, her voice just has this little oscillation that makes it especially blood-curdling, and it's very present here. Sound-wise, it's piercing, it's loud, I have no complaints. But I think I'm finding that the presentation of the screams is important too. Sydney is basically just a little Markiplier face cam in the corner of the screen right here. But at least she didn't get overshadowed by Marco Beltrami again, and for that, this is a pretty highly rated scream in my book. I hope you're not burnt out on screams yet, because it's time for the 8 out of 10 classics. Scream 1, Randy gets shot! I've watched several videos of various scare actor auditions. Look, don't judge me on how I spend my time, okay? But they always do these acting exercises where they have to act out various horror scenarios, and oftentimes there will be one where they have to act out getting injured or dying. Most of these auditioners are not very good at making this convincing, which really makes me appreciate Randy's performance right here. I mean, dude, when he screams, you can actually hear the pain in his voice. And as far as we know when we're watching it, that's it for Randy. Even though you can clearly see the tear in his shirt open up on his shoulder, he goes flying after he gets shot. It's one of the most iconic moments in the movie, partially because of Billy echoing Anthony Perkins' line from Psycho,
We all go a little mad sometimes.
but also thanks in part to Randy's excellent performance with his throat. That sounds weird. I'm moving on. Scream 3, Gale finds Roman Bridger playing dead. The finale of Scream 3 takes place at Roman's birthday party inside producer John Milton's Hollywood mansion. At first, I was gonna give this like a 1 out of 10 since I felt it barely qualified as more than a gasp. But that score was massively elevated by the scream that came right after, when Gale bumps into her on-screen counterpart, Jennifer Jolie. Not only is this a sustained, blood-curdling vocal collaboration commodity, but it's a fun character development moment too. Earlier, there were discussions between these two about what the real Gale Weathers would do, with them both having their own idea of what that looks like. But in the face of absolute fear, their screams are in perfect sync. You know I love a good Jennifer and Gale moment like this, it's just a fun character dynamic, and they end up having the same reaction, joining hands and navigating the house together. Scream 3, Gale and Jennifer react to seeing Angelina's death. We get one more tandem Gale and Jennifer scream, and this one is even better and more in sync than the first. Bonus points to this one for the violent hair action we see from their heads recoiling at the sight of the shocking image below them. Honestly, just look at this freeze frame. How this didn't end up getting used on a poster or something is a complete mystery to me. So what could this one have done better? I think it's another one of those hero screams that serves the camera better than it serves the scene. They're freaking out because they know that the killer must be close by, but they both decide to stay in frame for a few seconds so we can get a good shot of them screaming before deciding to bolt. I mean, it's called Scream 3. Can we really be mad at this? Scream 5, Tara tips over an IV pole onto Amber. They don't come often, but a couple of times per movie, there'll be a character who gives an exertion scream rather than a fear scream. And the thing I like about Tara's gutturals during the hospital fight with Amber is that it's actually both. But honestly, that alone is not enough to make this one great. It's the little choked up screams of pain that come right after. Let's not overlook the fact that this is a really good acting performance from Jenna Ortega. Even though she's fighting back, you can see that she's fighting through the pain. There are so many movies where a character gets hurt or even shot, and they do a great job of expressing that pain in the moment, but then not long after, they're just back to doing high action stuff. And there's a scar prosthetic now, but you can tell that they've pretty much forgotten that the character is supposed to be hurt. This reaction from Tara just feels so real and does an incredible job of enhancing the horror. And that's because it is. They actually stabbed her. Okay, no, I made that up. Scream 3, Gale sees the aftermath of Roman's fight with Jennifer. It's so interesting how Gail seems to be the queen of screaming at things that have been done to other people rather than herself. This is the 7th such occurrence in the series. But this one has a little bit of extra kick to it because, in a way, she is reacting to her own death here, because Jennifer plays her in the Stab 3 movie, or at least she was going to before her untimely demise. Scream 6, Chad is struck down by a masked killer. If we're only gonna get one Chad scream per movie, I at least hope it's gonna be a good one. And this is a good one. You can hear the pain in his voice as he cries out. The dude just wants to be helpful, but in each movie that he's in, he just gets cut down. And in both scenarios, it's while he's trying to protect his girl. I feel bad for Chad. After he goes down, there's also a big terror reaction, but her screeching is part of her dialogue, so it doesn't count. Scream 1, Casey Becker's scream when the doorbell rings. This is the first real scream that comes from an on-screen character in the franchise. It comes from Casey Becker right after she hung up on Ghostface for saying that he wants to see what her insides look like. The scream is not particularly blood-curdling, but I still really like it because it does a good job of showing us how hysterical she is. It does a better job of selling the fear than a classic high-pitched scream would. Scream 2, girl dressed as Chucky gets chased through the theater. I know it's from a non-named character, but this scream is awesome. It's piercing, she sounds terrified, she's running away, and in terms of plot, it does an awesome job of setting the scene by giving us a glimpse into the absolute hype train that is the premiere of Stab. I honestly love this scream, and the only thing holding it back is that it doesn't come in a scary situation, and there's no real danger associated with it. It's also the first scream in Scream 2. This actress actually is credited as Screaming Girl Up Aisle. Her name is Priscilla Schroeder, and this was her biggest role ever, ahead of being in 2 TV shows in the early 90s and 2000s. I'm pretty sure having a speaking part is what determines eligibility for the Screen Actors Guild. I wonder if only screaming counts as a speaking part. Scream 1, Sydney sticks her finger in Billy's wound. Okay, this might be one of the longest screams in the franchise. It's a solid 4 seconds of screaming. This should, by all measures, be one of the better screams that we have in the series, and it is pretty good. There's just something about Skeet's voice that doesn't quite do it for me. It's giving a sense of despair, but I'm not sure if it communicates the sense of actual physical pain. It's just not really doing a lot for me to enhance the horror. Also, I realize there's a big continuity error where Sydney's hand goes from his chest to being on the ground. I'll probably have to blur the hell out of it for YouTube, but trust me, it's there. Anyway, none of this nitpicking does much to reduce the sheer magnitude of this awesome scream from Billy. Scream 1, Casey Becker sees Ghostface in the window while hiding outside the house. This is probably the biggest scream we get from Drew Barrymore. It's a pretty good one. I love just how long and sustained the scream is. At this point, she's seen her boyfriend get gutted, and the fear is so real. She's basically in survival mode here. It is more of a yell than a scream, if that makes sense. It isn't as piercing as some of the other screams, but I do love the delivery. The scream is taken down a little bit for me because it's drowned out a little by the sound of the music and primarily the sound of the breaking window. I also wouldn't consider it a particularly scary moment, but it's still the big scream from Drew Barrymore, so that has to be worth something. Scream 3, Roman comes back to life and charges the trio with a bulletproof vest. This is the last scream chronologically in Scream 3. God, this movie had so many screams. This is actually more of a series of screams. Roman goes ballistic with one final effort to get to the heroes. And Dewey keeps bouncing him back with shots until Sid reminds him to go for the head.
Head! Shoot him in the head!
Scream 3 was originally supposed to be the end of the franchise, and if it had ended here, how fitting it would have been for the antagonist to go out screaming in one of the most deranged ways we've ever seen. Scream 4, Jenny Randall is chased through the house by Ghostface. This happens during the opening sequence. Jenny shows off several screams as she flees through the kitchen, to the front door, up the stairs, through the attic, before finally getting a knife to the back, getting crushed by the garage door, getting dragged away by Ghostface, and finally finished off by her masked stalker. The first one and the last one are doing most of the heavy lifting here, with the last one pulling double duty by also serving as the movie's title card scream, so I'll focus on that. At 6 seconds, it's one of the longest in the whole franchise, only being beat out by Maureen Evans' death cry in Scream 2, which we'll get to later. Despite this one being drowned out by music, you can still hear it pretty well in the mix. There are several different levels of oscillation here. In terms of pure audio, it's one of the best screams available for viewing pleasure. But the edit does knock this one down a little bit. We barely see Jenny on camera, instead focusing more on Ghostface, the knife, and the title card. Still a pretty good introduction to Scream 4. Scream 5, Amber comes back for one last scare. After seemingly being burnt to death in the kitchen, Amber comes back screaming for the obligatory one last scare moment. You would think if she's such a big Stab fan, she would have seen that screaming and drawing attention to yourself greatly reduces the chance that your last effort to kill the protagonist is a success. Maybe she just realized at this point that she was going to be the villain in whatever inevitable Stab movie would follow and just accepted her role. She did it for the fans. How nice of her. This is the last scream in the movie, and it's one of the better one last scare moments due to how the scream happens in tandem with the scare. Her vocals here are intense, she's burnt to a crisp like Freddy Krueger, which just looks cool, and the characters on screen seem genuinely freaked out by her until the moment that she's shot.
I still prefer the Babadook.
And that's a dumb line, and you're pronouncing it wrong. You'd think Tara would be able to pronounce her favorite horror movie.
You can't get rid of the Babadook.
Scream 5, Tara Carpenter opens the door for Ghostface. Say hello to the first scream of Scream 5. Hi, first scream of Scream 5. It's a classic scenario fit for the introduction of a new era of Scream. And like Sydney's first scream in Scream 1, it's a good opportunity for this new character to flex her pipes, as well as the other sweet sounds of her fearing for her life as Ghostface tries to break into the house. She is able to lock the intruder out of the house and arm the security system, but the incessant banging on the door gives her the opportunity to showcase a different type of scream as well. It's more of a unique sounding one. The only moment that sounds similar is Casey Becker's scream when the doorbell rings in the first movie. This Scream 5 opening scene is obviously a huge callback to the Casey Becker opening. I don't know if referencing the sound of a specific scream is even intentional. If it is, I feel like they're going a little too far to recreate the original. But that's the gripe I tend to have with these requels. Scream 5 represents the beginning of the Radio Silence duology, named after the production company that made these two movies, Radio Silence Productions. And that may actually be a fitting title, because these have a lot less scream time than the Wes Craven directed movies that came before. But a lot of them rank pretty highly, including the next. Scream 5, Tara gets beat up by Ghostface. We get 5 more screams in the opening here. There's one when Tara's phone rings after arming the security system, and 4 during the fight itself, the best of which is probably the one where she tries to use her hands to block the knife. It's the kind of scream you hear when you know it's a real situation and not some kids messing around. And I think that's kind of the difference between a standard horror movie victim and a scream queen, the ability to get the inflection right. Also love the unique camera angle, adding to the feeling of Tara's loss of control. This scene gives us a wide variety of screams, even though the title card scream is actually her saying no and doesn't count. All in all, a satisfying way to usher us into a new era of Scream. Scream 2, Sydney watches her roommate get slashed by Ghostface. There are some screams that are clearly just meant to be hero screams. You can tell the filmmakers are very self-aware of the title when they shoot screams like this. And Sid's reaction to the death of Hallie McDaniel is certainly one of those. We zoom in and the edit gives us a moment to allow the main character to rip out a chilling scream. And she delivers on this one. The sound is sweet, the reaction is appropriate given the stakes of the situation, and even though she covers her face, you can literally see the tears in her eyes. Sydney has been through a lot, and the nightmare just continues on, and this is the perfect scream to reflect that. It's a memorable scream, but these next ones are almost perfect. This is the 9 out of 10 category. Scream 6, Ghostface throws Quinn's body at Annika. I'll never get over the fact that they casted someone who looks just like Anna Akana and named the character Annika. Not sure if there's a story there, but if they had casted Anna Akana, it would have been hard for her to compete with this killer scream. And it feels warranted too. We've seen other characters give their biggest scream at the very sight of a deceased person, so how about having one thrown on top of you? If anyone deserves to freak out, it's Annika. Scream 1, Principal Himbry's scream when he gets stabbed. After sensing someone might be hiding in his office, Himbry checks the wardrobe, only to be attacked by Ghostface, who's hiding behind the door. He's already been stabbed before letting out his scream, but that doesn't stop him from making it a great one. This is a true primal scream. At its core, its purpose is to get the attention of someone who might be within earshot to try to get help, but it's cut off when Ghostface delivers his second stab right into Himbry's gut. I love the nuance in his performance here. How his first scream is loud, like a human alarm, but during the second scream, you hear the oxygen disappear from his diaphragm, and the noise just doesn't come out. It all feels very authentic. He manages to get in a few louder screams after this, but it's not long before he's dead. And what a way to go out. Scream 1, Gail realizes Kenny's body was on top of the news truck. Shortly after her false scare with Randy, Gail tries to get the heck out of there in the news truck, but a hard brake sends Kenny barreling over the windshield, and Gail absolutely freaks out. The moment where Kenny appears is pretty short, so the scream does a good job of helping sustain the horror for a moment. I think there's something to be said about seeing the characters being scared adding to the fear factor when watching a horror movie. It makes sense because we, by nature, are empathetic creatures. If you see someone crying, you're gonna feel bad for them, and when you see someone scared, I think it's totally possible to vicariously experience that with them. That's why I like bringing people with me when I go to haunts. In this moment, we can really see the true terror in Gail, from her uncharacteristic scream to her first reaction being to jolt back and kind of cover her face as if she can't bear to see her former partner in such a gruesome state. Which begs the question, why did Billy and Stu even put Kenny's body onto the roof? That's not where he died. They physically had to move him up there, and Kenny is not exactly a light load. As far as I know, there's never actually a reason given. Scream 3, Christine gets the knife. The opening of Scream 3 ends in tragedy when Ghostface's misdirect pits Christine against her boyfriend Cotton, and although she gets the upper hand on him, it leaves her back open to a little slice and dice. A lot of the most iconic screams on this list are connected to death blows, and this is no exception. I love how you can hear the pain coursing through her voice. I mean, as a person, I feel bad for her, but as a horror fan, I love it. I swear, I'm not a psychopath, I just play one on the internet. A nice little detail is how she tries to grab him. I'm assuming this is Roman, but he pushes her arm back down so he can turn his attention to Cotton. It's my second favorite of the Christine trilogy of screams, so stick around to see which one took the cake. Scream 1, Sydney falls off of the Mocker house. After being chased through the house by Ghostface, Sydney attempts to escape out an upstairs window, but unlike Jamie from Halloween 4, she's caught and thrown a good 20 feet onto a boat. There are actually 2 screams she gives here, one when Ghostface reaches the window and grabs her, which is pretty standard fare, and another when she's pushed away from the window. The second one is the one that elevates this scream to true greatness. It's a punchy, piercing scream of terror. If you were walking around the neighborhood and heard that, you would immediately fear for your life and know that this wasn't just part of a prank or some kids being obnoxious. But what elevated this scream several spots for me was the echo. Everything around the house is quiet, and Sydney's voice just reverberates and adds this extra sense of sonic impact. Couple that with the fact that she's in midair during this, and you've got one of the all-time moments in Scream history. Scream 2, Debbie jumps through the curtain to try to kill Sydney. At first I thought this was just another Sydney reaction scream, but it sounded a little too deep for Nev Campbell. So I played it back a couple times and realized it's actually Debbie, aka Mrs. Loomis, making this inhuman, almost demonic sounding screech as she makes one more pass to take the life of her son's killer. It's no secret at this point that the screams from the victims tend to resonate more with me than the screams from the aggressors. But this one kinda hits. It's the pure instinctual rage of a woman past her prime with no family left to speak of, all because of the Prescotts. And the noise that she expresses that rage with is honestly kind of freaky and unsettling. Good job, Laurie Metcalf, who not only has a place in Scream history, but also in meme history as Sissy Cobb, the Boggle Woman from King of the Hill.
Dang!
She can laugh, she can scream, she can really do it all. There are a few more of these aggressive screams over the next few seconds, so I'm grouping them all together here. I never really appreciated how scary she becomes while watching Scream 2 at normal speed before. I mean, just look at this still. Truly deranged. Scream 6, Annika gets her belly button pierced with a knife. I had to play both of her screams back to back to try and decide which one I like better, and I think it's this one. Honestly, kind of a shame they killed this girl off so soon because both of her shrieks are pretty peak. I love that we go into a close-up right here and see her excruciated expression. And I can't show it, but Ghostface twists the knife and you actually see her abs get scrunched up like a wrung-out towel. It's pretty metal. You can even hear her screams continue to reverberate through the apartment as the others look for something to fight back with. The actress Devin Nakota was a child star and dancer, and Scream 6 was her first theatrical film. She will be missed. But I got more screams to go through, so let's keep going. Scream 1, Stu's head is about to be crushed by a big old 90s TV. After seeming to get the upper hand, it all goes downhill for Stu after he confesses to having a thing for Sid. She smashes a vase over his head and rejects him before pushing a big old monitor with the brand covered up by tape onto his head, and his favorite Scream queen, Laurie Strode, ends up being the last thing he sees before blacking out. This is without a doubt the best scream we get from Stu. He knows it's over at this point, so this is just a genuine, involuntary escape of fear. And we're staring right down his windpipes when it happens. Totally befitting for the climax of a movie called Scream. Has anyone ever noticed that he has some kind of silver filling in his molars? Guess he should have spent less time eating grapes and drinking beer and more time brushing his teeth. Anyway, the only thing that would have made this scream better is if it was just a little bit longer. But we get to hear several seconds of him struggling as he gets electrocuted, so I can't complain that much. This is it, my fellow Scream connoisseurs. The best of the best. The screams of the crop. The top 5 best bellows in Scream history. Scream 1. Mrs. Becker's scream when she sees her dead daughter hanging in a tree. Oh yeah, this is what Scream is all about. This is a classic blood-curdling scream from actress Carla Hatley. Fun fact, this is actually her only credit on IMDb. I don't know who she is or how she got involved with this movie. But this is just an iconic scream. She sees Casey in the tree and you already know it's coming and she just lets it rip. I guess the only reason that this one isn't higher is because it's a reaction scream, not an imminent danger scream. But it does a great job of taking advantage of the filmmaking concept of montage. We see Mrs. Becker first, and we hear her amazing scream before we get a look at Casey's corpse. And that moment of anticipation, along with the scream, forces our imaginations to dream up the worst possible outcome moments before we see it. It's a great way to build terror. She also just keeps screaming over and over, forcing us as the audience to experience that never-ending nightmare with her. It's actually 4 screams in one, and it's absolutely a top-tier scream that will never be forgotten. Scream 5. Amber gets lit on fire. You knew if I didn't give Amber Freeman at least one good spot on this ranking, the Mikey Madison fans were gonna come after me and skin me alive. I mean, they're probably gonna do that anyway. Her fans are fucking crazy. But I'm used to dealing with them at this point. I didn't let that have an effect on my ranking. I'm a man of integrity, and I will not be bullied by Mikey Madison fangirls. Nah, this is an awesome scream that actually lives up to the insane imagery of Amber getting shot back onto an open stove and getting fully ignited from the face down. Sure, it gets a little bit drowned out by the music, but I truly feel like Mikey Madison left nothing on the table here. I think earlier I said something about the trade-off between quality and quantity, but she kind of breaks that rule with a series of coarse, bone-chilling death cries that just keep going until the moment that she collapses. Outside of just the performance, it checks off all of the other boxes, being one of the most horrifying deaths in the movie and moving the plot forward by cutting the number of antagonists in half.
Enjoy that torch.
You bet I did, gal. Scream 6. Laura Crane gets stabbed to death by Ghostface. Holy crap, where did that come from? I can try to provide astute analysis as to why one scream is better than another scream, but to a certain extent, it just comes down to how cool does your screaming voice sound. And as it turns out, Samara Weaving's screaming voice is pretty cool. Probably destined to end up in a horror movie with a name like that, she got her start in the genre in the TV series Ash vs. the Evil Dead, where her screaming ability is very evident. This led to appearances in The Babysitter 1 and 2 and Ready or Not. Not great movies, but they were great opportunities for Samara to exercise her cinematic vocals. But this one in Scream 6 might just be her best performance. It's a sharp, piercing zinger that she manages to sustain through several more knife wounds. The characters tend to reserve their very best screams for last, the death cry at the end of their story. We'll see more of that at the top of this list, and Laura Crane's death is certainly no exception. Congrats to Samara for making the top 3. Scream 3. Christine sees Ghostface in her home, and he's got a knife. If you don't remember, this happens during the opening of Scream 3. Cotton gets a call insinuating his girlfriend Christine is in danger, he races home, and we hear his voice announcing that he's home, but instead, Christine runs in to Ghostface. Holy crap, that was awesome. Just one of the best sounding screams you can find. And you can tell she's really invested in it because of how the tendons in her neck become tense. It's probably the best neck tendon clench we've seen since Annie from Candyman 2. which still remains the benchmark to beat in terms of neck tendon activation. The only real complaint I have with Christine's scream here is that we cut away in the middle of it. I feel like if you get an awesome performance like that, the best thing you can do as an editor is just to stay on it. The actress for Christine, Kelly Rutherford, is mostly known as a TV actor, but she was in one horror movie before this called Phantom of the Mall: Eric's Revenge. I have no idea if it's supposed to be serious or not, but the title is kind of funny, because who is Eric? As far as I can tell, it's not a sequel or part of a franchise or anything. Oh wait, his real name is Eric Matthews, so this is a spin-off of Saw?
Brutality!
Kelly plays a sales girl. This might be her, I'm not sure. Anyway, I like her scream in Scream 3, and there are a couple others as she's trying to flee down the hall. Congrats to her for having the second best scream in the whole franchise, but there can only be one winner. A scream so iconic that I still have it burned into my memory. A scream that gives you chills anytime you watch this movie. A scream that sets the stage, pun intended, for everything that would come after. At number 1, we have Scream 2, Maureen Evans' Death Cry. Jada Pinkett Smith sure gets to exercise her vocal cords considering how short her time in the movie actually is. But this one was obviously going to take the cake. Her fifth and final scream is the most memorable in the franchise. It's the longest in the franchise so far at 6.5 seconds. It's a painful scream that finally gets the attention of everyone in the room, a packed house of movie theater goers. And it's perhaps one of the most valid screams in the franchise. It's literally her last cry moments before her death. I think the performance is great. It's not like a classic Final Girl scream, obviously, but I actually like that it's different. It fits the scenario perfectly. And that's not even getting into the social commentary and the significance of her death. Earlier on, when she and Phil arrived at the theater, she expressed frustration with the horror genre's lack of diversity.
All I'm saying is that the horror genre is historical for excluding the African-American element.
Bad grammar aside, Maureen learns to be careful what she wishes for in the cruelest twist of fate possible, because she and her African-American date become the first two to die in a story that constantly pushes the envelope of traditional horror tropes. Her scream almost reads as the cry of her people, finally included, only to experience the cruel, cold blade of Ghostface's knife. It's also an awesome way to ramp up hype into the Scream 2 title screen. It tells the audience it really could be your lucky day in hell. Scream 2 may have won the prize for containing the best scream, but I'm sure you can guess which movie contained the most screams. Let's all say it together. 1, 2, 3, Scream 3. There were 41 screams in the movie. That's a scream every 166 seconds. Actually, there were 41 scream events in the movie. That doesn't even include repeat screams and simultaneous screams. I'm not sure you could even get a definitive number, but for these stats, we're going to be using my rules for what qualifies as a scream. Scream 4 had the least screams, but remember that also has the most in-movie screams, which I didn't count. If you toss those in there, Scream 5 would be the lightest at just 17 screams, which still seems like a lot. Combining all the films, there were 162 screams. On average, that's one scream every 4.29 minutes. The most frequent screamer, no surprise, is Sidney Prescott. She had 30 separate scream events. Gail was in second place with 18, Dewey in third with 13, and Jennifer Jolie came in fourth with 9. Since I know some people will be curious, Sam only had 5, while Tara had 7. And finally, let's look at the average scream rating for each movie. Scream 5 was the winner in quality, with an average rating of 5.24 out of 10, just beating out the original Scream, which had a 5.23 average. So now that you have all the Scream data, there's only one more question to answer. Why do we scream? What is the evolutionary purpose? As we've seen in this video, it's clear that there are different screams for different scenarios. Fear screams are a biological alarm system. Humans are a tribal species, and making a lot of noise can be a safety mechanism. I think pain screams exist for the same reason, but these are a level 2 alarm, as seen by all the high rankings produced by all of the death cries and pain screams seen throughout this video. There's more urgency, so the scream is more intense. Screams of aggression are the opposites. They can increase a person's oxygen intake, allowing them to strike with more power. The rarest scream in this video was the scream of joy. I just see this as a signal of bonding among people. If I'm not mistaken, every joy scream mentioned in this video comes from a group of people, whether that be a movie audience, a group of friends at a party, or a drunk guy having fun cheering because everyone else is cheering. If you want to be a part of a community of like-minded screamers, then make sure you subscribe to CZsWorld. I upload new horror-themed videos every week, so make sure you ring the death bell and select all notifications so you don't miss an upload. Once you've done that, check out that playlist on the left for more of my Scream content. And I will see you in the next one, assuming we both survive.